By this time 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton had already called Donald Trump to concede the presidential race, and Barack Obama had met the president-elect at the White House. Obviously, Donald Trump is doing things differently. He still hasn't acknowledged Joe Biden is the president-elect, and tweets like he might actually keep his job. The question for the media: how to cover a situation that's comic, tragic, and everything in between. Adam Riley has more.
This week, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was asked if the State Department is working with Joe Biden's transition team. The answer got a lot of people talking.
There will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration.
So was that a joke to goad Biden voters? Another example of Trump and his allies being sore losers? Or something much more ominous?
Some members of the Trump administration are signaling that they're unwilling to accept the results of the democratic process.
According to John Alsop of Columbia Journalism Review, the challenge for the media is discerning how to describe what Trump and his deniers are saying.
So much of Trumpism is kind of premised on this very blurred, almost indistinguishable line between a joke and not, right? It's like they're joking in the sense that they have plausible deniability, but also if they can get away with the thing they're joking about, they're not joking.
So maybe the press shouldn't reassure us by saying Trump knows he's lost, but just needs time to process it.
His emotional state is quite fragile. The numbers are clearly against him, and he's starting to recognize that.
But Alsop also says we should think twice when covering doomsday scenarios, like Republican lawmakers executing a coup.
If you lead your coverage with the most alarmist take, sometimes you can, I guess, aid in the objective of undermining confidence in the system. You can sort of inject these ideas with greater prominence into the sort of national conversation when, and perhaps they don't merit that.
Of course, during the 2016 campaign, the most alarmist take was that Donald Trump might actually win.
Joanna, I was thinking John Alsop of Columbia Journalism Review makes a really good point, because every time you report one of these things like, he could possibly challenge this in court and come out a winner in a state or two, you're sort of giving them the fuel that they need when it's probably 99.9% unlikely, but there's no other way to approach it. I mean, he's been silent until today, and what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem the press has had throughout the Trump presidency. This is not really a new problem in terms of how to take these outrageous actions and these outrageous tweets, this rhetoric that comes from like beyond the pale, and figure out how to cover it coming from the president of the United States. Usually a way to do it is to cover it, because you can't ignore it. It's the president. But to wrap it in a tone and a placement in your newscast or your magazine or your newspaper that signals whether it's a clear and present DEFCON 1 kind of threat, or whether it's a thing that the president is doing that he's been doing for the last 4 to 6 years. And I think that's where some media outlets have done better than others in towing that line.
Yeah, I think we reached peak idiocy maybe a day or two ago. And although we don't have resolution yet, it feels like we're moving toward it at this point. I think we've kind of hit the top and we're on the other side toward reality at this point. I think that this very discussion suggests that we may be overstating what journalism is able to do. We cover the story, and the story is that President Trump refuses to concede and that he has a lot of Republican enablers. Now, I think that the media have done a pretty good job of pointing out that Joe Biden won by a fairly comfortable margin. There is no sign that there was any widespread fraud. I thought the New York Times did an excellent job the other day in contacting all 50 states to see whether there were any problems. There weren't. And I think that the story may be winding down at this point. At least I hope so.
Yeah. I have to say, I certainly put this in a context by remembering the recount in Florida back in 2000 there, where we went on for 37 days without knowing it. And, of course, there wasn't talk of a coup or anything at that point, but it was the uncertainty of what was going to happen. And but I do think, I agree with Dan, I think the alarmist tone that we're seeing in a lot of places, the very idea of a coup is it's over the top. It's not happening. We're starting to see it. But I think Joanna's point is an excellent one, that the one thing we can do, other than get people out of their filter bubbles, which unfortunately that we can't do, is the media can start playing the story further and further down. Those people who still read newspapers or go online, that's not the top story that you might see. It starts dropping down the page, or maybe inside, or it's on the second screen rather than the top screen. If it's television, it's not your lead block. It's likely it's coronavirus, and that really deserves it. And then you finally get to the president somewhere in there. And after a while, I think the signal is that the media says, you know what, this is not a big deal. Don't get yourself all worked up about it.
Well, I have to say that this is DEF CON, and this is what President Trump has done all 4 years. And instead of journalists oftentimes saying, this is a lie, this is wrong, this is bad, that Republicans are supporting a lie, and that's what the context is here. It's not uncertainty, Tom. It's quite certain what is happening. But to cover it as if it's uncertain is the problem. So you need to, at this point, if you're a journalist, in my opinion, do more of what the New York Times did. Call all the people, say, here is the premise upon which these Republicans are standing by the president after we know the results of this election, and there is no fraud. How about playing the story that I've only heard once or twice, that every time those lawyers who are representing the president go to court and are asked, do you have evidence? Their answer is no. So how are we covering this as if there is anything that is possible here except for people who are willing to support a lie? That is a problem, and it is an existential threat to democracy, and that's the tone by which we ought to cover it. Now, can it come down 2 or 3 points? Of course it can. Should have done that from the beginning and said, this has no merit. Here's what the president is doing. Here's what his own lawyers say he is doing. And this is an existential threat to democracy, because there are elected officials who swore to represent the people who are representing a lie.
Not too much you can add to that, Callie. And I will say, though, that the media should have also fought back on that. Well, who does the media think they are, calling the race? It's like, no. They were reporting the results, not calling the race.
Exactly.
But there wasn't enough pushback on that either.